Hi everyone, it's me again, and today we're going to be talking about the James Somerton A Measured Response apology, and we're going to do a rhetoric analysis of it. So a shorter form rhetoric video today, but unnecessary one nonetheless, I think, because the apology was something else. But first, links, sources, ways to support the channel all down below, along with an email to suggest content, Patreon, YouTube memberships, and Amazon wishlist, all that kind of stuff, along with all of my social medias, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, the whole thing, and my sourcing, which there is very little. I watched his video and then I pulled some of my own books, but I digress. It's still there. I wanted to mention it because, especially with the topic of James Somerton, I find it to be almost comical that, you need to mention that you actually cite your things properly. Thank you also to my members and patrons. Names on the screen as requested. Now, we have just 2 parts, shorter video today. Part 1, point-by-point rhetoric analysis of James Somerton's apology, and then just a really brief discussion on why the apology, spoiler alert, doesn't really work. So let's get right into the news. Part 1, point-by-point rhetoric analysis of James Somerton's apology. The video immediately opens up with a content warning about self-harm, which is interesting because of the first apology that James Somerton did, which you can see at the end of my H Bomber Guy video, which I will link down in the description, that he had mostly kind of just talked about and borderline weaponized stresses that had come to him as a result of the plagiarism and YouTube video coming out. Then he continues that he wants to become a really good example of crediting authors. So what he's trying to do now is kind of prepare people for this attempt at making himself a martyr. Then he doubles down that any of the offensive stuff he didn't write, and he says that he trusted Nick's judgment, then immediately says that he isn't throwing him under the bus, as I mentioned. And then at 23, this is a 35-minute long video, by the way. At 23 minutes, he states that he wanted to make more videos that he felt he actually liked, and sort of saying that the audience pushed him into making videos he didn't want to make, and that's why he plagiarized them, which is such an absurd concept.
We ended up making a lot of videos we didn't want to make because people were asking for them, and so there were a lot of videos we made that we didn't want to make, and I think those videos are very clear on which ones those were. One of them never got officially released. It was released to patrons. Some patrons have shared it to other people before all the videos went private. And a lot of people hate the analysis that Nick and I did on it. And so maybe it's good that that never got properly released, because maybe it would have hurt people. And I don't want that.
If you're trying to do fan service, that's your choice to make money and be greedy. So then it's not their fault that that's happened. That doesn't even make sense. Once again, he dilutes the plagiarism to laziness. That video has haunted me so much only because I watched it so many times that it constantly autoplays on my YouTube now. And it's like I can't escape it. I think I had to watch it 8 times by now. So James Somerton says that he's planning on giving the money from this video and the videos that he has put back up on his channel from previously being privated to H Bomber Guy's team. And if not, as in if they will not accept it, he will donate to Wikipedia along with a couple of different trans organizations. I have received some updates since filming this video. For one, H Bomber Guy responded to the following tweet: at H Bomber Guy, I'm so curious if James Somerton has actually reached out to you or your team about the funds from his quote-unquote measured response video. H Bomber Guy says, nah, he has not. And then I saw another one, which I found on the H Bomber Guy Reddit, but I did go back and cross-reference to make sure it was real. But in the video here right now, I have the Reddit screenshot because that's where I found it originally, where it says the following: James Somerton is now contacting people whose work he stole and offering to pay them back in exposure. And Mick Abrahamson at The Nanobiologist says, Mr. Steal Your Work, James Somerton emailed me with an apology. The final paragraph is the icing on the cake. He wants to pay me back in exposure. Lol, lmao. And then the email says at the bottom, I offer you my most sincere, honest apologies. If there's anything I can do to make it up to you, whether it be spreading your latest work to my admittedly smaller now but not insubstantial following, promote projects you might be passionate about, or even help produce videos for you, I want to make things right if I can. Sincerely, James Somerton. Which almost feels more useless than not saying anything, kind of, because why would you want exposure tied to James Somerton, who is incredibly controversial and kind of universally disliked right now because of everything that happened. And this really shows too, because I've been checking in on the Patreon. Last time I checked, it was at 11 paid members. And for reference, I have a 10th of James subscribers almost. I mean, not quite a 10th, like an 8th. And I have 37 paid members on my Patreon. So if that gives you any idea. Right now, as I'm literally doing this, it is 13 paid members on the Patreon. So not doing well. Anyway, that's my update for now. So this is something that people more or less were demanding before in other kind of similar situations, such as when people take advantage of marginalized groups for content, if people have previously done so in the first place, to reconcile with putting your money where your mouth is, because a lot of people who do make it big on social media make a lot of money. I'm always hesitant when people immediately open with something like that, just because it is truly, when you have like a YouTube commentary bingo card, putting your money where your mouth is like definitely a space on there. And then actions mean more than words. And I'm going to show you with my actions is like the free space in the middle, which if you didn't guess, James Somerton says that too. So
just a disclosure, this video is monetized, but revenue from it will be sent along to HBomberGuy's team to be dispersed to the people whose work I plagiarized. If his team won't accept it, I'll be making monthly donations to Wikipedia and Trans Lifeline going forward. You may have also noticed that a few of my past videos have gone up on the channel again, and revenue from those as well will also be sent along with the revenue from this video. Over the last couple of months, I've been getting in touch with the people who I plagiarized to apologize one-on-one instead of a mass apology. It's a bit difficult because many of them don't have public email addresses, so I'm still working on it, but it is a top priority of mine. I've heard back from a few of them, and they were actually incredibly nice, accepting my apology and just imploring me to do better in the future.
Then he apologizes for being a poor spokesperson for the LGBTQIA2S+ community as a cis white gay man. James says that in trying to be inclusive for all of those in the LGBTQ community, he began to speak over people. And by doing so, by literally using their exact words, but then plagiarizing those words. And that he wanted to show different perspectives, but then they were still masked as his own through the use of plagiarism.
I also want to apologize to my audience, though. You trusted me to be a good representative of the queer community, and I was not that. I tried to be. I tried to be a voice for every member of the queer community, but that was a failed endeavor before it even started. I'm a cis white gay man. No matter how much I try to be a good spokesperson, I can never really truly understand the life experiences of other far more put upon members of the queer community. This is one of the reasons that I would use their own words. But I should have made it very clear that that's what I was doing.
He would not make it clear that it wasn't his own words. This is something incredibly important that he glossed over. Firstly, he glosses over his whiteness as something that causes him to silence people, and also that it causes for a certain sensitivity and weaponization that comes with sort of white fragility. Yet he demonstrated the victim mentality and the white fragility both in this video and the previous apology video. And in the live stream responses when someone would say that he's had plagiarism allegations and he would essentially just call them stupid. I'm going to include a quick little excerpt from this book here called Me and White Supremacy and talk about this sort of white fragility that he is experiencing. But first, let's kind of talk about like the value of like white privilege. It is important to understand that white privilege is separate from, but can intersect with class privilege, gender privilege, sexuality privilege, age privilege, and able-bodied privilege, or any other type of privilege. For example, a person can be a woman and still have white privilege. Not having male privilege does not cancel out one's white privilege. In this case, straight privilege and like not having that doesn't cancel out that he has white privilege, for example. A person can lack economic privilege but still have white privilege. Not having wealth does not cancel out white privilege. A person can be gay and still have white privilege. This is the white gay man thing that we've got going on with Mr. James over here. Straight privilege does not cancel out white privilege. Lastly, having white privilege does not cancel out one's marginalized identity, and having white privilege with other privileged identities, e.g. cisgender male, straight, able-bodied, etc., adds to the amount of overall privilege that one holds. So now if we get into the sort of other concept of the white fragility, this book outlines a couple of examples on how white fragility shows up. Getting angry, defensive, or afraid, arguing, believing you are being shamed, crying, or simply falling silent and choosing to check out of the conversation. This is in reference to when your privilege is challenged. James, through being this like self-imposed martyr of the gay community online, really weaponized it and would get very angry when being confronted about the privileges and the way that his plagiarism was silencing other marginalized people. Calling the authorities, manager, police, social media censors on BIPOC when you are uncomfortable with what they are sharing about race. I've had my social media posts reported and censored more than a dozen times because of white fragility. That's obviously the author, not me, saying that. Deleting what you wrote on a social media platform. Another form of running away and pretending it never happened, or physically leaving a discussion when you cannot handle where a conversation on racism is going. In essence, white fragility looks like a white person taking the position of victim when it is in fact the white person who has committed or participated in the acts of racial harm. So with this in mind, and you know, there might be some people that are saying maybe it's a bit stretched that I brought that in immediately. He did, for one. And for two, he would talk about privilege and lack thereof for the gay community and where he aligns in this all the time, and was kind of trying to virtue signal that sort of knowledge in this apology video in the first place. And this is not to mention that nothing silences voices more than stealing their art and research, in turn taking away income from those who are marginalized. And not to mention, on top of that, how difficult it is to make it in journalism, independent publishing, independent journalism, criticism, or those sorts of writerly fields, especially when you are someone who is not straight, perhaps not male, perhaps not white, etc., etc. When he's taking these plagiarized things, which often include these kind of very unique viewpoints that him as a white person will not really be able to perhaps articulate the same way, it is just essentially just highway robbery of their perception, making James seem like he has this hyper awareness of his surroundings that he doesn't actually possess. There was an apology to Jesse Gender. There was some conflict regarding someone doxing James or something, and then there's something to do with Jesse. I don't really know the extent of all of that. I thought it was a bit silly, and I don't really know what's going on with that, so I will leave Jesse for that one. Explains why he thought crediting people he explains that he thought that crediting people only in the opening credits was fine, which is very strange to me, because I talk about how important it is if you want to get into content creation, if you want to get into anything like this, that you either on your own learn what proper citation is like, you learn how to credit people, you learn when it's necessary to credit people, or you kind of learn these practices in a post-secondary space. And it's so funny to me that James spent all this money on all of these degrees and he doesn't know how to use like in-text citation, and he also doesn't know that there is a limit in the balance of writing that eventually it becomes plagiarism. Like, you can't have your paper, and I said this in my H Bomber Guy video as well, you cannot have your paper only be quotes from other people. That's still plagiarism, even if you say where it came from. The whole point of producing a piece, the whole point of writing a paper, the whole point of making a video is that it's your thoughts, your processes, your opinions. In this video too, I'm demonstrating how to integrate secondary sourcing into a YouTube video, right? I showed you the book, I'm reading the book, and then the book is also done is written out in the description as well. And I have it on screen. I say now reading blah, 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 right? So in this case, this book was the one that I was just reading, right? It's just because like I'm also not crafty with my video editor. I think there's a way to do like transcription comments on screen or something, but it just takes like a really, really long time. But if I do have the digital version, I usually will also put the text on screen for you as well. It's just I have a lot of books in like physical form. And it's just so funny too, because, you know, some people might want to challenge me on the fact that I said, like, I know for a fact that he learned what proper citation is like. He went to, I believe, Carleton University, which is like not only have a bunch of my friends gotten into, I did like a mini university program at, I got accepted to, and had family friends go to and do their masters and things like that. It's just commonplace in Canada, at least in your first English class that you have to take, even in STEM programs and stuff, you have to take like a writing class in your first semester in order to kind of like solidify what the practices are like. I don't know if maybe when James was going, this wasn't the case, because some of these things are somewhat new. If you've done a writerly discipline, which he did sort of, I think he did like film or business or both or something, you definitely 100% did that, because also the university doesn't want, if you do research with them especially, they don't want a lawsuit on your hands. And when you do something like a master's or whatever, you have copyrighted material. My capstone research project for my master's has a little copyright on the bottom of it, actually. And then this in turn is also doubling down on the, oh, well, I credited everyone in the opening credits thing, which H Bomber Guy proved to be demonstrably untrue in his own videos. He says, oh, you have all these people in these credits, but you've actually plagiarized from like 30 different people, and you only include 5 in the credits. It's one thing to plagiarize from people where we know who you plagiarized from because you tried to put it in the beginning, but then you're being even sneakier by giving the facade that you have credited someone while still hiding that you've stolen from a bunch of other people. This person has built his career on dishonesty and is expecting people to presume that he is able to move forward from that with an apology that is based entirely in excuses. I actually checked his Patreon. He made a new Patreon too, by the way. I had to plug that in the video. And it has 11 paid members, which I think mine has more, which is nuts. Then James describes how he would use other people's words to build up his scripts Then James describes how he would use other people's words inserted into the scripts with the intention of going back and editing them after. Then he uses the excuse that he has memory issues from head trauma, that he couldn't remember what to remove from the scripts.
Nick and I had both grown up poor, so we started doing what we could to try and stabilize our income as much as possible. This meant putting out more videos, which meant I had to take over more of the writing duties. But since filming, editing, usually doing multiple edits because of YouTube copyright issues, as well as managing the channel and dealing with my mom's recent cancer diagnosis, all of that was already taking up so much of my time and attention. This led to a lot of copy and pasting blocks of text into scripts. My intention at the time was to use these as a jumping off point once Nick and I sat down to edit the script, because that's what we would do. I would sort of put in my parts, Nick would put in his parts, and then we would sit down at a table, read through the whole script, and kind of try and make it seem cohesive. But, and here's something I'm sure a lot of people will call a bullshit excuse, I have memory issues because of a head injury from when I was a child. They're actually getting worse. I've talked about it on streams and in videos, so yes, it is real, but some people will call it a bullshit excuse anyway. The head injury is actually what led to me having epilepsy, which is why I can't work in any job that involves physical labor. Employers can't get insurance for me to like lift things or operate vehicles and stuff like that. I actually did marketing for a restaurant group for a little while, but got let go when they found out that I was epileptic because, at least according to them, I couldn't be insured to be in the kitchens where I needed to be to film videos and take photos and stuff like that. But anyway, when it came to editing the scripts, I couldn't remember what I'd written and what had been copy-pasted. We should have just chucked out everything that I had put into the script and filled them in with wholly original thoughts. Or I should have been taking notes on where things came from so that we could at least cite them in the videos, if nothing else. But I never did that.
So I have like 3 different viewpoints for this. 1, if you are cognizant of this issue that you have, then why did you keep doing it? Like, why did you not insert things perhaps color-coded? Why didn't you insert things with markings on them? Secondly, I kind of highly doubt that, also because the plagiarisms were very tactily integrated inside, that you weren't aware of the process and you didn't change them on purpose to fit the writing pattern of the text that you were visiting. And 3, it's clear that that's not true in the sense that you're describing it because you were sneaky about who you credited and who you didn't. Then he also makes a point to mention being laid off and his mom getting diagnosed with cancer, which caused for financial issues that he needed to pump out more videos. Again, making it seem like he was put into a corner where hyper-plagiarizing marginalized people was the only solution, which is a very ignorant way to approach a situation like this. James continues to discuss how he was trying to fund this movie called from Telos, but T-E-L-O-S. It's just hard. I have trouble like trying to figure out how to say it because Telus is also like a phone company in Canada, but with a U. So he just kind of goes through how like this movie was a mess and like the funding didn't go to the right places and how like people are still going to get a movie, but he moved from the East Coast to Ontario, which Ontario is extremely expensive to live in. Believe me, I know. I lived like an hour from where James Somerton lived in Toronto for 3 years, and me running back to Quebec tee hee, haha, enjoy because my living expenses were about to cut in half. I can understand that sentiment in the sense of like your funding does not go nearly as far if you live somewhere like Ontario. He also makes a point, arrogantly add that his original movie idea, which he also seemed to have ditched in the first place. So I don't know why you need to make this argument besides the fact that you're trying to like somehow revive your non-existent remaining positive character. He said like if we actually read the book, you would know that it wasn't plagiarized from that concept and that it was a trope that a lot of people used.
The feature we settled on, entitled Final Girl, was about the lone survivor of a slasher movie type massacre 10 years after the fact, as she was publishing a book about her ordeal, drawing attention from people online convinced that she had actually been the killer all along. In the end, we would find out that the killer was the boyfriend of the girl who the main character had secretly been dating at the time of the killings. And most of the people he killed were, in his eyes, collateral damage as he made his way to our main character, because he was not happy that his girlfriend was cheating on him with a girl. And to those who say that I plagiarized the plot from the novel Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, read the book. It's nothing like the plot of the movie. And the final girl is a trope in horror movies. So if using the final girl trope is plagiarism, then basically everyone who's made a slasher movie since Texas Chainsaw Massacre owes the Tobe Hooper estate some money.
You can still plagiarize things that contain tropes, so that still doesn't prove anything. James isn't really into proving stuff. He's rather lets other people do it and then pretends that he's the one that proves something. So also this so-called movie thing is allegedly making a movie this year, apparently. We'll see what happens. This is where the self-harm stuff comes in. He claims that he dropped off of social media because he didn't even want to have ever existed. Talks about how like people online were trying to find him. This again is something that I don't think is really necessary because we kind of figured it out. And also this was mentioned in the weird crying apology thing that he had put out in December. In December. Something that he is missing also, and I really hate when people do this in an apology video, is you should be able to watch it and actually know why they're apologizing without having to watch the original source content. So for example, when James Charles was apologizing for the allegations, he would just reference these random TikTok videos and this Twitter account, but wasn't head on facing what he actually did. James Somerton also does this. He doesn't open by saying, I was accused of plagiarizing numerous people across dozens of videos, and I was plagiarizing those who were marginalized people and claiming the work as my own. And then you can explain your reasoning, but you're not backing up anything because we don't even know what it is. I know because I have a PhD in H Bomber Guy's plagiarism and YouTube anniversary at this point because of how many times I had to watch it. But that doesn't mean that other people do. And this can just be like a weird off-putting video for those who were, I guess, remaining to be there for James, but there seems to be very few with 11 patrons at this point. So he's constantly saying that people who were calling him out prior to the H Bomber Guy video were malicious and dishonest, and then perpetuated those behaviors in plagiarizing people and in the mean responses he was doing, while literally now coming back and asking us to feel bad for him. It's just a very wild approach to take personally. I don't know if I would do that myself. States that the videos that are still up are not plagiarized. I'm going to wait for other people to check. I feel like I can look up right now and see. I want to see if his Reddit has found anything. He also says that the misinfo that was in some of the videos was not malicious and that we should not be that hard on him because it was an accident. But the whole point is that when you're plagiarizing everything, you are clearly careless. And that's one of the main issues too. So you've even stolen misinfo, allegedly, hypothetically in Minecraft. So it's just like the barrel just keeps getting lower and lower and lower. And then he ends with action speaking louder than words. Take a shot, please, of water for those of you who are playing the game.
I'm sorry to everyone I plagiarized. I'm sorry to everyone I've hurt. I'm sorry to people who feel lied to. I'm sorry to people who feel like I abused the queer community. It was never my intention. Again, I'm sorry to Jesse. There were actually several other YouTubers who were very nice to me. But I feel like with everything that went down, Jesse is the one that I should apologize to the most. I'm sorry for the people who felt scammed, who thought that Telos was a grift. It was not. It is not. I am very sorry. And I hope, given time and my actions proving it, that you can believe me.
Now we get into part 2 about why this response doesn't work. For one, the main thing that's wrong with this apology is that unless you watch the H Bomber Guy video, you have no idea what's happening. So he is deliberately misleading people who are not aware of what was going on. Being caught should not be the only basis of addressing things, and even if it is, you should open up to the fact that you have been caught and explain for even those newcomers who are coming in. He puts himself in a position where it seems like we had him in a chokehold to plagiarize because of the demands of the platform, the demands of the job, etc. Despite the fact that there are many other jobs that do exist, even just working for other YouTubers, because he talks about like how he has epilepsy and how Canada doesn't let him work anywhere, despite the fact that Canada literally has in the chart of rights and freedoms that you cannot be removed from work or refused work because of a disability. But I understand that that doesn't always come through properly, and a lot of business owners disobey that concept and do not follow that law. He acts like you can cite away any context, that he can just say things with other people's words. He could say things as long as he puts a little name at the bottom and build his whole concept and everything off of everyone else's ideas constantly. As long as he mentions it, it's still plagiarized at that rate. Just write your own script and then insert sourcing. It's really not that hard. They teach you to do this in Ontario, I believe, when you're 14 or 13. So I don't understand what this like block is. His video lacks quality because of plagiarism, and it makes a very strong disconnect between his sort of rhetorical image and the actual message that he's trying to deliver. And I was trying to find my book. I'm going to read for a second from the Rhetoric of Motives as well to describe this concept. Yet perhaps we here overstate a case. A God unites generalization with personification. And whereas dialectic God might seem to lack the second of these elements, it clearly possesses the first. In this sense, pure persuasion could qualify as one member of the pantheon. It would be an equivalent for the goddess Pytho at that point where Greek religion and Greek science overlapped, since the Greek equated science with generalized knowledge. Yet the principle of personality would be there too, though indirectly, for ideas are personal. They are personal because only persons can have them. They are an aspect of something so essentially personal and symbol using, human rationality. An idea can seem impersonal because many men, or all men, may share it in its personality or partake of its substance, quite like communicants ritualistically eating the blood or the body of their god. Indeed, once you linger on this question of personality, you find it bristling with dialectical paradoxes whereby the personal and the impersonal subtly change places. Paradoxes that fugitively invest humans with divine attributes, hence adding to the mystification so important in rhetorical prodding. When a figure becomes the personification of some impersonal motive, the result is depersonalization. The person becomes the charismatic vessel of an absolute substance, and thus magically endowed, the person transcends his nature as an individual, becoming instead the image of the idea that he stands for. So kind of what I was reading that for is that James has made himself the personification of detaching the personal from the idea. No ideas are his. He's just kind of now famous for stealing other people's ideas. He can't even conceptualize, it seems, not stealing other people's ideas, and has said that he's just going to keep citing stuff with just facts from now on. And there's just this gigantic disconnect between the processes that you should be having when you're creating content, especially with how arrogant he was and how much he boosted himself up. You'd think he'd have some capacity to do this. The self-shielding, the excuses, the lack of directly providing context, people who didn't see Harry's video, which in essence is still trying to dodge it, the weird cinematography, the really, 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 really close shot, like filming it like this, which is very weird looking, just leads to another questionable video at best. To conclude, links, sources, ways to support the channel all down below, along with an email to suggest content and my social medias. That was our rhetorical analysis on James Somerton, seemingly weaponizing white privilege, seemingly being manipulative, seemingly trying to weaponize any excuse possible, seemingly just on the same stuff. H Bomber Guy kind of called it all in his video about what he would do if he was to respond. Thankfully, I think this is the last of this situation. I hope y'all have an amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.